In many ways, the F-22 Advanced Tactical Fighter is the true daughter of the F-117. Stealth will be a major factor in the USA remaining a superpower in the 21st century. We work very hard with the F-22 to integrate stealth into a supersonic, super-maneuverable fighter, and we succeeded. After our last day of YF-22A flight demonstrations from Edwards, late on December the 28th, 1990, I said to my wife Judea, "We won, and we did. Our team delivered results." It was a privilege to lead this team. The F-22 Raptor was the most advanced aircraft of its kind, designed around the principle of first look, first shot, first kill. It's set to become the primary air superiority fighter for the US Air Force in the 21st century. The Raptor, as its name suggests, is a lethal machine. As menacing as it appears, it's even more deadly when deployed for its missions, deadly and undetectable from long distances. This stunning fifth-generation fighter combines unparalleled dogfighting abilities with precise ground attack capabilities. Confidence in these objectives stems from a synergistic blend of features and capabilities, including stealth technology, the ability to cruise at supersonic speeds over long distances without afterburners, and an integrated, highly sophisticated avionics suite. The FA-22A has been designed to be more maneuverable, better armed, more reliable, easier to maintain, more readily supportable, and more capable in air-to-ground missions than any other comparable aircraft in history. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, the Soviets developed various missiles to attack at different altitude bands, making it impossible to fly under or over the missile threat. You had to confront it directly. One way to address this was to prioritize the suppression of enemy air defenses, specifically by destroying missile sites and their radars, as the most crucial mission for the Air Force. By the 1970s, air superiority had once again become a top priority, leading the US Air Force to commit to building its first pure air superiority fighter, which would eventually become the F-15 Eagle.
I have never seen a finer joint government-industry team that's organized with the technical competence to carry out the job that's been assigned to them, or to do it in a manner of close-knit teamwork.
However, just as the F-15s became operational in 1978, alarming new evidence suggested that their superiority might be short-lived. At the same time, and perhaps most importantly, reconnaissance satellites photographed several new fighter prototypes, the Mikoyan MiG-29 and the Sukhoi T-10 at the Romanskoye Flight Test Center near Zhukovsky, about 40 miles southeast of Moscow. This new generation represented a significant improvement in capability over anything previously observed by US intelligence services. It was clear to everyone involved that a new air-to-air combat platform will be necessary to counter the threat posed by these new Russian aircraft. The Sukhoi T-10 was a huge shock to Western analysts. It was larger than the F-15 and far bigger than any previous Soviet-built fighter. If the MiG-29 had already concerned the American military establishment, the existence of the Sukhoi T-10 set off alarm bells. These aircraft were highly advanced, capable of competing with some of the top NATO fighters like the Phantom and ultimately the F-15. Just weeks into his first term, America's 40th president increased US defense spending by $32.5 billion, initiating a massive rearmament of the United States.
That is one that I mentioned earlier. It is absolutely essential that we increase our spending for national defense if we're to preserve the peace.
In 1981, the Cold War was heating up. As Reagan and Brezhnev faced off, the US Air Force concluded that it urgently needed a replacement for its F-15, an advanced tactical fighter, ATF, that would have no equal. As American planners began developing the concept of air-land battle to prepare for potential World War III, the US Air Force started considering the type of equipment it would need for such a conflict. On August 24, 1982, a Program Management Directive (PMD) was issued, changing the program element's name from Combat Aircraft Technology to Advanced Tactical Fighter. Concurrently, 2 sub-projects were established under this banner: the Advanced Tactical Fighter, which included concept and technology development. 7 airframe companies, Boeing, General Dynamics, Grumman, Lockheed, McDonnell Douglas, Northrop and Rockwell, each received $1 million concept development investigation contracts, and the Joint Fighter Engine, an engine technology demonstration program managed jointly with the US Navy. Pratt & Whitney and General Electric each received contracts valued at $202 million in September 1983. Other companies contending for the contract included Allison, Garrett, and Teledyne CAE. The 7 competing companies submitted a total of 19 conceptual designs, ranging from Northrop's lightweight cooperative fighter, smaller than an F-16, to Lockheed's battle cruiser, based on the design of their short-lived YF-12A long-range interceptor. Additionally, an in-house design, a subsonic low observable fighter, was submitted by the Air Force's Flight Dynamics Laboratory, AFFDL. Of the approximately 19 studies submitted, 4 were eventually chosen to represent different mission philosophies: a very light, austere, low-cost design, a supersonic cruise and maneuver design, a subsonic low observable design, and a high Mach, high altitude design. From these, it was concluded that the ideal air-to-air platform would combine low observability with supercruise and superior maneuverability. This platform would, in turn, offer reduced vulnerability to surface-to-air missiles, while nearly eliminating exposure to anti-aircraft artillery, AAA, and other short-range systems. The Red Baron study, which analysed air-to-air combat in Vietnam, had sparked the race for stealth technology. An operational analysis of the Vietnam War showed that most aircraft were shot down by enemy aircraft they'd not seen. This highlighted the significant advantage of being undetected in air combat. Air combat data from World War II and Korea reinforced the need for invisibility. The principle of stealth technology is to make an airplane virtually invisible to the enemy. An aircraft's shape must reflect incoming radio waves away from enemy radar rather than towards it. To further enhance low observability characteristics, an airplane is covered in materials that absorb radar signals, further reducing its visibility on a radar screen. Leading the way in stealth technology was Lockheed Skunk Works. In 1977, amid unprecedented security, Lockheed had flown a prototype of the world's first stealth fighter. By the 1980s, during Operation Just Cause, its F-117 had helped to dismantle General Noriega's regime in Panama. Now, the US Air Force decided that any new fighter must incorporate stealth technology and identified 2 other areas in which a future air superiority fighter should excel. The challenge was issued, and it was up to the finest aviation manufacturers in the world to respond. The Advanced Tactical Fighter program was about to begin, and the Raptor, America's 5th-generation fighter, was about to be hatched. By 1983, US-Soviet relations had reached a new low. Following Leonid Brezhnev's death, the Politburo, now controlled by former KGB boss Yuri Andropov, was labeled by Reagan as the focus of evil in the modern world. Continuing his policy of rearmament, Reagan announced plans for the Strategic Defense Initiative, better known as Star Wars, prompting a furious reaction from Moscow.
That we could intercept and destroy strategic ballistic missiles before they reached our own soil or that of our allies. I know this is a formidable technical task, one that may not be accomplished before the end of this century. I call upon the scientific community in our country, those who gave us nuclear weapons, to turn their great talents now to the cause of mankind and world peace, to give us the means of rendering these nuclear weapons impotent and obsolete.
In August, when Korean Airlines Flight 007, on its way to Seoul from New York, strayed several hundred miles off course into Soviet airspace, Russia responded. A fighter was dispatched, and the civilian airliner with 269 people on board was shot down. The shooting down of KAL 007 sent shockwaves around the world, straining international relations to the breaking point. Reagan's reaction to the crisis strengthened US conviction that stealth would now be the prime requirement for America's new fighter.
I'd like to talk for a moment about why we're developing a new fighter at this time. There's probably not a person in this room or in the reach of your television cameras who isn't aware of the contribution of stealth to our success in Desert Storm. In that case, it was a bombing capability that we were seeing in action. But the principle will apply to both ground attack and air-to-air missions in the future. The ATF is intended to replace the aging F-15 Eagle, currently our frontline fighter. The Air Force's F-15s are outstanding aircraft, and they swept the skies in Desert Storm. However, when the ATF is first deployed, the F-15s will be over 25 years old. Several other aircraft, including some we faced in Desert Storm, are aerodynamically competitive today with the F-15 and other leading U.S. fighters. We win today with an edge in avionics and by relying on the superior skill and training of our pilots. Others will try to close that gap between now and the year 2002, when the first ATF squadron is fielded. The ATF will balance stealth, supercruise, and advanced avionics in a highly maneuverable fighter that will ensure that our pilots get first look and first kill. Thus, the ATF will ensure American air superiority well into the next century. As we have seen in Desert Storm, air superiority is essential to effective air and ground operations. American ground forces have not had to fight without air superiority since 1942, and we plan to keep it that way as well.
Following 4 initial drafts, the basic framework for the ATF requirement was released to the industry. This framework called for a radius of action of approximately 800 miles, supersonic cruise capability of 1.4 to 1.5 Mach, a 2,000-foot runway requirement, a gross takeoff weight of 50,000 pounds, and a unit cost of no more than $40 million in 1985 dollars. Importantly, the proposal implied that the ATF Life Cycle Cost, LCC, the aircraft unit cost upon delivery plus the cost of all spares, fuel, maintenance and flying, should be at least as good as, if not better, than the McDonnell Douglas F-15. It was concluded that the submissions from Lockheed and Northrop were superior to those from Boeing, General Dynamics and McDonnell Douglas. Each manufacturer would submit a design for the Demonstration Evaluation or DEMVAL competition, with the understanding that the winning company would be the prime contractor, and its partners would be subcontracted to produce major components. Lockheed, whose initial design studies had been considered front-runners during the early ATF reviews, had begun consortium discussions with Boeing and General Dynamics as early as June 1986. A public announcement was made on July 2nd, but didn't formalize an agreement with its partners until the following October 13th. Consequently, Lockheed assigned Sherman Mullin as General Manager for the ATF Team Program Office. Mullin would lead Lockheed in the prime contractor role, leveraging the unique technical strengths of both Boeing and General Dynamics. 2 weeks later, Northrop followed suit by leading a team with McDonnell Douglas. In response to these teaming decisions, revised proposals from all 7 airframe contractors was submitted on July 28, 1986. By default, the two consortia were selected on October 31, 1986, to build two prototypes, each for the revised demonstration and validation phase. Lockheed, under a $691 million contract, would build two of what later became its Model 1132 aircraft, initially referred to as Configuration 092, under the official Air Force designation YF-22. Northrop, under a similar $691 million contract, would build two of its N-14 proposal under the official Air Force designation YF-23. At the end of the process, one of these designs would become America's new advanced tactical fighter. Costing billions of dollars, the new fighter aimed to make a significant technological leap into the 21st century. Just 9 months after being selected to build the demonstration and validation fighters for the US Air Force, Lockheed shocked everyone by scrapping its original design. In a hectic 3-month process, with help from its partners, Lockheed produced a completely different configuration, featuring a clipped delta wing. Over the next 4 years, at a cost of just over $2 billion, America's tactical fighter competition became the largest program of its kind. In 1990, just months after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, the shapes of the two rival designs were finally unveiled. Northrop's version, called the YF-23, closely resembled its original design. In contrast, Lockheed's design, called the YF-22, appeared surprisingly conventional, featuring 4 tail surfaces, vectored thrust, a broad solid body, and a conventional wing. Unlike Lockheed's other stealth aircraft, the F-117, radar-absorbent materials were not applied over the entire FA-22, but used selectively on its edges, cavities, and critical surface areas. The F-22 carries its weapons internally. 4 weapons bays are hidden in the central mid-body section. 6 missiles can be carried in the ventral bays, which are covered with bifold doors. The side bays each hold 1 Sidewinder missile on a trapeze launcher. The mid-body section also houses the fighter's landing gear and complex inlet ducts. Attached to the mid-body is the forebody, which accommodates the cockpit and advanced avionics. Both the YF-23 and the YF-22 are impressive-looking machines, but their performance still needs to be tested. The most crucial stage of the competition is still to come, the flight testing. Northrop was first in the air. In August 1990, flown by Paul Metz, the YF-23 got airborne. The test was a huge success, but Lockheed was quick to respond. On September the 29th, at Edwards Air Force Base in California, Lockheed Chief Test Pilot Dave Ferguson prepared the Raptor for its maiden flight. Over the next 3 months, the Raptor underwent a series of rigorous tests. The Air Force required both teams to provide performance projections, which would then be compared with the actual performance of the airplanes in various conditions, including subsonic and supersonic flight at different altitudes. The winner of this stage would earn a contract for 650 aircraft. The decision would hinge not just on what the contractors promised, but on the Air Force's confidence in their ability to deliver. During flight testing, the Raptor outperformed the Northrop YF-23 in several crucial performance areas. The YF-22 had clearly demonstrated that in every category it was far superior to any existing fighter. But it would be events in 1991 that would carve out the Raptor's future.
The 2 aircraft you see here, or you've seen in action in the flying prototypes, I think are an excellent demonstration of exactly what we were trying to accomplish with this demonstration validation front end and the prototyping and hardware demonstration, including the avionics test beds that went along with that. We ended up with 2 aircraft each one of which could meet the Air Force's technical specifications and technical requirements. And that's why, as I said in the formal remarks, that we had here a set of proposals or a set of contract options, any one of which was in the acceptable range and any one of which could have been selected. So we were dealing with shades of differences. Given that all of the proposals were in the acceptable range, we had to make the evaluation based on the criteria that were called out in the RFP, and we've done that, and the best I can do for you today is to report the final judgment of that process.
22 minutes after midnight on January the 17th, 1991, Lockheed's stealth F-117 spearheaded US strikes against Saddam Hussein's regime. The performance of Lockheed's stealth bombers during Operation Desert Storm gave the company and its aircraft priceless publicity. However, another aircraft also emerged from the Gulf War with a glowing reputation. The F-15, the aircraft destined to be replaced by the ATF, emphatically confirmed its status as the foremost air superiority fighter in the world. Now, it appeared that the need for an advanced stealth fighter, the F-22, might be unfounded. But not everyone agreed. By April 1991, bogged down by the F-15 debate, the US Air Force prepared to announce the winner of the Advanced Tactical Fighter contract. Would the Raptor emerge from the controversy unscathed? After the DEM-VAL flight tests of the prototypes, the Secretary of the Air Force, Donald Rice, announced that the Lockheed team and Pratt & Whitney were the winners of the ATF and engine competitions.
The DEM-VAL phase has accomplished the risk reduction and the design trade-offs that are its purpose. Its success is demonstrable in the excellent performance of the prototypes and the quality of the proposals from the contractor teams. To ensure the fairest possible evaluation of these outstanding designs and development teams, the evaluation process that we've been through has been intensive, thorough, and professional. That evaluation was conducted by Air Force and Navy teams, by a team involving both Air Force and Navy personnel, included not only the developer community, but users, testers, contracts experts, cost analysts, and all who would be involved in the next phase of development. The success of the demonstration validation phase and this formal evaluation process is also demonstrated by the fact that the evaluators were able to bring to me, as the source selection authority, 4 awardable contracts, each of which represented acceptable proposals that met Air Force requirements. However, in evaluating the engine and airframe proposals, one combination clearly offered better capability with lower cost, thereby providing the Air Force with a true best value. With all that said, I now announce that the ATF team will be composed of the Pratt & Whitney company who designed the F-119 engine, which will be integrated into the F-22, designed by Lockheed, team with Boeing and General Dynamics.
The YF-23 design was considered stealthier and faster, while the YF-22, with its thrust vectoring nozzles, was more maneuverable as well as less expensive and risky. Having won the contract, Lockheed announced that it would locate the F-22's headquarters in Georgia, where the Raptor's forward fuselage would be built. General Dynamics would construct the F-22's mid-body section in Fort Worth, Texas, and Boeing would manufacture the wings and tail in Seattle, Washington. Follow-on work with the aircraft took place at Edwards Air Force Base, involving an additional 100 hours of flying time, approximately 25 flights, to expand the YF-22A's flight envelope and to explore specific segments in greater detail. However, on April 25, 1992, the program encountered its first major setback. During preliminary testing, the YF-22, flown by Tom Morgenfeld, crashed shortly after takeoff. The aircraft hit the runway with the landing gear retracted, skidded approximately 8,000 feet and caught fire. A key element of the Raptor's design, thrust vectoring, uses movable exhaust nozzles to adjust the angle of thrust from the two Pratt & Whitney engines. As the Raptor made its low-level flyby, Tom Morgenfeld kept the stick forward to keep the nose down. However, as the landing gear was retracted, the thrust vectoring engaged, pushing the aircraft towards the tarmac. The pilot struggled to correct this sudden change in direction as the Raptor began to veer off course. Despite the loss of the stealth aircraft, the program had achieved its major goals. 10 million man-hours of analysis, 4,000 hours of radar testing, and hundreds of hours of flight testing had gone into the aircraft's development, even before construction began. In fact, the F-22 had undergone more flight testing than any other fighter before full-scale production. On April the 9th, the first F-22A, officially named Raptor, an earlier attempt to name the aircraft Superstar failed in 1991, was unveiled in a public ceremony at Lockheed Martin's Marietta, Georgia facility. Air Force pilots would soon have the opportunity to evaluate the new aircraft themselves. First flown by the Air Force in 1997, pilots at Edwards Air Force Base surpassed 2,000 flight test hours in over 900 missions. One of the key advances in the Raptor's design is its advanced cockpit and integrated avionics systems. Key mission systems include the Sanders General Electric Electronic Warfare System, the Martin Marietta Infrared and Ultraviolet Missile Launch Detector, the Westinghouse Texas Instruments Active Electronically Scanned Array Radar, the TRW Communication Navigation Identification Suite, and the Long Range Advanced IRST currently being tested. The Electronic Support Measures Systems radio frequency receivers give the aircraft the ability to perform intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance tasks. The F-22 features a glass cockpit with all digital flight instruments. The monochrome head-up display offers a wide field of view and serves as a primary flight instrument, while information is also displayed on 6-color liquid crystal display LCD panels. The ejection seat in the F-22 is a version of the ACES-2, commonly used in USAF aircraft, featuring a center-mounted ejection control. The F-22 is equipped with a sophisticated life support system, including an onboard oxygen generation system, protective pilot garments, and a breathing regulator anti-G valve that controls the flow and pressure to the pilot's mask and garments. The Raptor carries a formidable array of ordnance. It has 3 internal weapons bays, a large main bay located on the bottom of the fuselage, and 2 smaller bays situated on the sides of the fuselage, aft of the engine inlets. The main bay is divided along the centerline and can accommodate 6 launchers for beyond visual range missiles, while each side bay contains a launcher for short-range missiles. The primary air-to-air missiles are the AIM-120 AMRAAM and the AIM-9 Sidewinder, with plans to integrate the AIM-260 JATM in the future. Missile launchers require the bay doors to be open for less than a second. During this brief time, pneumatic or hydraulic arms push the missiles clear of the aircraft to minimize detection and allow deployment during high-speed flight. Although the F-22 typically carries its weapons internally, the wings feature 4 hardpoints, each rated to handle 5,000 pounds, 2,300 kilograms. Each hardpoint can be equipped with a pylon capable of carrying a detachable 600-gallon, 2,270-litre external fuel tank, or a launcher holding 2 air-to-air missiles. In addition to its armament of 8 missiles, the fighter is also equipped with a gun. At one point during the evolution of the Advanced Tactical Fighter program, the US Air Force considered eliminating the gun to save weight. By the late 1990s, pilots involved in the Raptor program were confident that their aircraft could easily outperform and defeat any other fighter. This confidence, however, was based primarily on controlled flight and missile firing exercises. What these pilots truly needed was combat experience, and they were about to get it. The F-22 is equipped with an internally mounted M61A2 Vulcan 20mm rotary cannon embedded in the right-wing root with the muzzle covered by a retractable door. The cannon's firing path is displayed on the pilot's head-up display. Before the F-22 Raptor enters operational service with the US Air Force in the autumn of 2005, it will undergo thousands of hours of rigorous combat testing. Despite this, critics of the F-22 program argued that the F-15 Eagle, which the Raptor is intended to replace, already possesses the attributes necessary to remain the world's premier air superiority fighter well into the new millennium. This view is dismissed by the US Air Force. In March 2003, supporters of the F-15 were given the opportunity to test whether the Eagle was still the best fighter in the sky. 5 F-15s were pitted against a single Raptor in a head-to-head exercise. Although no missiles were used, the sorties closely resembled actual combat, with no quarter given by either side. It was a kill or be killed scenario. All 5 F-15s were piloted by experienced F-22 pilots. One by one, the Raptor brought them down. In these combat tests against F-15s, the F-22 Raptor decisively proved its critics wrong. In December 2005, the USAF announced that the F-22 had achieved initial operational capability. During Exercise Northern Edge in Alaska in June 2006, 12 F-22s engaged in simulated combat exercises, downing 108 adversaries with no losses. Over the course of these exercises, the F-22 achieved 241 kills against 2 losses, neither of which involved an F-22. Due to US federal law aimed at protecting its stealth technology and classified features, the F-22 cannot be exported. Instead, US fighter customers are opting for earlier models like the F-15 Eagle and the F-16 Fighting Falcon, or the newer F-35 Lightning II. The F-35 incorporates some technology from the F-22, but is designed to be more affordable, flexible, and exportable. Originally, the USAF planned to acquire 750 ATFs. However, by 2009, the program was cut to 187 operational aircraft due to high costs, a lack of air-to-air missions because of the focus on counter-insurgency operations, a ban on exports, and the development of the more affordable and versatile F-35. The last F-22 was delivered in 2012. The F-22 Raptor was conceived amid Cold War fears that Russian-made fighters might outclass the F-15. Yet, as the world has evolved since the Cold War, the United States Air Force remains the sole operator of the F-22. As of August 2022, it has 183 aircraft in its inventory. In today's changing world, there are few certainties, but the F-22's dominance over the skies remains one of them.
It's an early summer evening in an airfield in Georgia. The tension as palpable as the humidity. A new plane is scheduled to make its first flight tomorrow, and things have to go well. The F-22 Raptor is a fighter for the next century. This conglomeration of titanium, aluminium, and thermoplastics incorporates bold and forward-thinking designs. It possesses speed, stealth, and flight control systems designed to give its pilot overwhelming superiority against the current and future enemy weapon systems. It's the fighter that today's children may fly tomorrow. With it, they will be masters of future air war, capable of overwhelming an enemy into submission. More than 10 years of work and complicated web of contractors and subcontractors in 46 states have gone into producing this next-generation fighter. But already the Raptor has a troubled past. First, the Air Force made demands for fighter capabilities, but no one was sure they could be met. The funding cuts caused restructuring and repeated delays in development. A prototype crash. A subsequent version had so many problems, its first test flight was delayed for months. The plane has faced and still faces criticism from advocates of other planes and from Congress, which has been fretting over the F-22's cost. The last thing the plane's supporters need now is a bungled test flight that adds to the criticism and further clouds the future. The people who know this plane immediately believe this is what America needed for the future. They are as ardent in the support for the F-22 as the critics are opposing in it.
I coined the phrase once upon a time, so there are going to be two kinds of airplanes. There's F-22s and there's targets.
But there are tests to be passed, and tomorrow will be one of them. Inside Building B1 at Lockheed Martin Aeronautical Systems in Marietta, Georgia, a deceptive peacefulness hangs over the assembly line. Work here is also done after months of preparation. An aircraft assembled here will take flight for its first time. A major milestone for even the simplest airframe. Sitting on a ramp some 2 miles away, the F-22 is not scheduled to take off for at least 6 hours, but already crew members are hard at work. They double-check and triple-check every last inch of the aircraft. Absolutely no one wants their assembly, their system, their one small piece in this $187 million puzzle to go awry. In fact, components on the ship 4002, as the aircraft is known here, have been meticulously tested and retested ever since the plane rolled out of the assembly hangar in February, some 4 months ago now. The day has come for this aircraft's maiden flight. The F-22 cannot stumble. The Raptor must accomplish what is called a flight with no squawks. That is a test flight that goes off without a hitch. At 5 a.m., the pace of preparations starts to pick up. No detail, however small, can be overlooked. Not even the removal of a potentially damaging pebble. A cleaning truck patrols the ramp area, vacuuming up such debris. Lockheed Martin's security officer, Patty Howarth, holds a quick briefing to remind her staff of their priorities.
Everybody forgot everything they learned on how to drive on the flight line, and every single person who had a flight line pass was after driving on Friday. Everyone.
Howarth will spend the rest of the morning making sure her security team keeps the taxiway clear. Then, she will join on the rescue teams standing by, to assist with security in the case something goes wrong. Patty also worked on the security detail when Ship 1 flew for the first time.
It was probably one of the greatest days of my life. I've never really been involved in aircraft, and I thought, oh, it'll just be another day. But it was probably 110 the first day it lifted off, and I had goosebumps going up my spine.
As the sun rises, responsibilities are handed off from the night crew to the crew that will launch the plane. Crew Chief Terry Beyer oversees it all, supervising every crew member working on the F-22 today. He's been up since 2 a.m.
A very vested personal interest. Very little sleep last night. Toss and turn. It's been 8 years to get this far, so we're looking forward to a fun day.
Among Beyer's responsibilities this morning is ensuring all instrumentation and systems are functioning, so the team can get data on the plane's performance. That data will flow back to a control room here at Marietta.
It's very important in the program, and we've demonstrated not only to the company people, but to the general America and Congress that this airplane can be built here in Marietta, and we have competent people. We've decreased our build time here by over 3 months, and the number of write-ups that we have left open to do is down to a handful of write-ups versus the first airplane. We had significant things that we had to fix when we come back, as far as things that we couldn't complete to go fly.
Beyer believes that won't be the case this time, but he won't know for sure until his flight is over. The man with the best vantage point to compare Ship 1 and Ship 2 is test pilot Paul Metz. Metz, who flew Raptor 1 on its first flight, is a former U.S. Air Force fighter pilot with more than 7,000 hours flight time and more than 33 years of experience. He's been the chief test pilot for the F-22 program since 1992.
How dangerous is my job? They don't sell insurance too readily to us for this job, but quite frankly, the job has become much safer and much more controlled. If you look back to the early days of flight test, there were a great number of losses of life in aircraft. We're actually able to use simulators today to predict very, very well what we're going to see.
After several flights in the first F-22, Metz thinks the aircraft will endure itself to future pilots in a number of ways.
From the simple things like amazingly soft landings and the ability to feel really good about yourself when you come back from a flight in terms of your ability to fly it, to extreme maneuverability, to cockpit displays and information that are beyond the realm of the current fighter pilot to envision, and the ability to sneak around in space without people seeing you. All of these things together make for a tremendous package, and the fighter pilots of the future are going to point to the F-22 as their favorite. I'm sure of that.
On the ramp, the ground crew continues working. Byers is already pacing. Dan Stevens is the senior avionics technician for the F-22 program. He's responsible for the computers and other electronics on the aircraft to make sure they are functioning and ready when the pilot gets into the cockpit. Backing him up are a team of experts for every computer on the plane.
We actually have IPT engineers that are ready for their systems as they develop problems that answer any questions. If I have a question, that I know who to go to. We have experts on every component on the aircraft.
The F-22's pioneering electronics are perhaps the crew's biggest source of worry. They've undergone extensive testing, and Stephen believes most of the problems have been ironed out. But until this plane executes a flawless flight, Stevens won't be able to relax.
All of us are putting quite a bit of effort into it to see that it makes its goals, and especially this flight this morning. We're very proud of this aircraft, and we know it's going to take us through this millennium and beyond.
The pride comes from long hours. Flight test engineer Hal Wyeth has been on the ramp since 3:30 a.m.
Well, I broke a little sweat, but we're doing real good.
His team has actually been running final checks since last night. But for Wyeth and his crew, the payoff will come the same way it did with Ship 1, with a successful flight. Wyeth recalls how he felt watching the flight of the first F-22.
When he actually rotated and broke ground, it was a great feeling after all the effort that's been put in by so many people. You get a little lump in your heart, you know, that kind of thing.
Today, however, the emotions may run deepest for this man. Vincent Davino is the team leader for airworthiness and delivery crew. He's been sheepherding the F-22 from the beginning, sweating the details for 10 years.
I couldn't begin to count it. You're looking at everything here from the airplane readiness, fueling, security of the ramp, making sure you have the right number of people and the right skills aboard. There's quite a few things that go into saying the airplane's ready for flight.
But this will be the last time Davino has to officially worry about a flight. After 4 decades in the business, he's retiring. Into failed or delayed test flights is not how he wants to end his career.
A lot of emotion that goes along with it. There's a lot of time and 42 years of experience in this business about to come to a close here.
As it sits on the map this morning, the Raptor is just a couple of miles from where it was assembled, but Ship 2 is years removed from its birth, and in terms of technology, light years beyond its ancestors. The impetus for the F-22 began in 1981, when the Air Force announced that it needed a new air superiority fighter. Fighters such as the French Rafale, the Eurofighter Typhoon, and new generations of Russian Sukhoi and MiG have steadily reached parity with, and in some cases surpassed, the F-15. Additionally, Russian-made SA-10 and SA-12 air defense missiles could shoot down an F-15. They were for sale to any country with enough money to buy them. So the Air Force began looking for a new fighter that, once again, would allow the US to leapfrog the lethal competition.
The F-22 is going to help us own the skies, and owning the skies is what will allow us to dominate future battlefields in a way that will enable every other part of our military force, whether it be forces on the ground, at sea, or in the air. Owning the sky makes everything else work.
The new fighter would need the classic ingredients of air superiority: speed and agility, comprehensive situational awareness, the ability to shoot before being seen, and the ability to elude ground threats. But the Air Force decided it wanted to look far into the future, to a fighter that would be superior starting in 2004, and dominate at least 25 years beyond that. That meant a huge leap into the next millennium for the aircraft designers. They would have to predict future enemy capabilities and concoct a fighter that could respond with overwhelming superiority. But asking manufacturers to look that far ahead was like asking designers at the P-51 to foresee the impact of jet propulsion and predict the development of the F-4 Phantom 25 years later. Design teams look for the 1980s equivalent of the development of jet propulsion. They found it in the computer. By 1986, a profound shift away from massive mainframe computers had begun with the miniaturization of electronics that opened new possibilities for design of the fighter for the next millennium. Under development at the time was stealth technology. Stealth modifies a plane's physical characteristics, primarily its external surfaces and heat signatures, to reduce its radar profile. The Air Force had already begun huge leaps in stealth with its F-117 fighter and B-2 bomber. Strategists have called for such an aircraft as the need and development for small expeditional forces to respond to regional conflicts around the globe. The stealth aircraft offered a perfect fit for such operations, in that it could carry out a mission quickly, with precision, without detection, and without the need for support aircraft. And stealth became a requirement for the new fighter. The Air Force also demanded that it fly at supersonic speeds without afterburner. Designers, mindful of the requirement for domination in the next century, also proposed a fighter that used easily upgradable computers. The computers would provide the pilot seamless situational information.
Get on top of it, and it's coming back downhill.
Computers would also coordinate with the other stealth technology to deny the enemy information about the plane's whereabouts. The idea was to have a plane that would give its pilot first look, first shot, first kill capabilities, then zoom away undetected, until the initial targets exploded. A third consideration arose from Congress. Federal budget constraints likely would limit the number of planes built, so the new fighters would have to be more with fewer numbers. They would have to be more destructive and deadly, and allow the US to win quickly and decisively, with minimal casualties to Americans.
This airplane is the future of our country. It will allow us to own the skies over any future battlefield, and owning the skies over those battlefields is going to keep Americans alive. And that's what the mothers and fathers of America are going to want.
But this futuristic vision required a lot of work. The avionics goal alone seemed huge. In 1986, close to impossible. Computers that could handle all the plane's requirements didn't exist. Design teams fretted over whether they could pull off this new airplane. Nevertheless, they forged ahead. In 1986, the Air Force selected 2 teams of defense contractors, Lockheed, Boeing, General Dynamics, and Northrop McDonnell Douglas, to build prototype airplanes known as the YF-22 and the YF-23. Engine makers Pratt & Whitney and General Electric were selected to build prototype engines, and all the Air Force would have 4 versions of this new plane to consider. The prototypes materialized and began test flights in 1990. Northrop McDonnell Douglas's YF-23 was a graceful aircraft with forward fuselage resembling a gooseneck stretched out in flight. Its wings created a clip diamond pattern with all edges swept forward or back by 40 degrees. When viewed from above, its broadly angled twin tails propelled the wing's leading edges. The YF-22 supported a slightly more conventional look, particularly in its shapely jutting twin tails and the more triangular shape of its wings. Designers of both planes incorporated several key developments in stealth, high-speed cruising, and avionics. To increase the fighter's stealth, designers reshaped internal and external parts of the aircraft. They changed how they treated its external surfaces through coating and irregular shapes. Designers also manipulated the plane's heat emissions to mask the fighters from infrared or heat-seeking detectors. The engine makers helped by reducing the need for afterburner to go supersonic. Also modified were the fighter's noises and colors to make it harder to detect by sonar and by the human eye. Ultimately, the fighter's radar cross-section, the element most crucial to foiling the enemy, was reduced until it resembled radar signature of birds and bees. Speed was another way the designers boosted the fighter's air superiority. Conventional fighters get their supersonic speeds through afterburner. But this consumes excessive amounts of fuel and can be used only for a short amount of time. The F-22 Pratt & Whitney engines can develop 35,000 pounds of thrust and push the Raptor to well above Mach 1 without using afterburner. That means the fighter can fly at supersonic speeds for longer periods of time, giving it a greater range of operation and enemies less time to react. Designers call this capability Supercruise. It significantly exceeds the capabilities of engines powering the Air Force current F-15 and F-16 fighters. Finally, the designers incorporated the latest developments into computers to create avionics that give the pilots superior situational awareness. Everything a fighter pilot needs to know, from the location of his wingman and his target to enemy aircraft and radar sectors, is combined into a series of easily understood displays. An enemy aircraft is a red triangle, an unidentified aircraft is a yellow square. Our green square is a friendly aircraft. Wingmen are in blue. All the pilot has to do is to glance down to his situational display and instantly grasp the battlefield around them.
In fact, we bring in people who have no flight experience whatsoever, put them in the concept demonstrator, let them use displays that are very close, very similar to what's actually in the airplane. And to a person, they can operate the systems, lock onto targets, and destroy enemy aircraft.
Finally, the Air Force demanded that this new fighter demonstrate superior agility. On the YF-23, agility was attained through traditional means, aerodynamics and flight control surfaces. But the YAF-22 added thrust vectoring, using nozzles on the back of the engine to direct thrust up or down. With thrust vectoring, the YF-22 achieved a record-high angle of attack, 60 degrees, an angle that would stall most other aircraft.
I now announce.
In April 1991, U.S. Air Force Secretary Dr. Donald Rice announced that the YF-22 with its Pratt & Whitney F-119 engines would be the design for its future advanced tactical fighter, citing better capabilities and lower costs. The Air Force awarded the winning team a $9.5 billion contract. While design work began on the newly dubbed F-22, the Air Force continued test flights on the YF version. On April 22, 1992, while returning to Edwards Air Force Base in California, the YF-22 began oscillating severely, 40 feet above the runway. Pilot was unable to regain control. The YF-22 crashed and burned.
The Air Force's prototype YF-22 aircraft crashed April 25th at Edwards Air Force Base as the pilot was completing a practice approach over the runway.
The investigation into the crash of the YF-22 tied it to the thrust vectors. They had been left on during the landing and contributed to the oscillation as the pilot moved that control stick. The crash was labeled a pilot error. The pilot himself wrote off the crash and walked away from the airplane. F-22 Chief Test Pilot Paul Metz joined the F-22 program shortly afterwards.
The problem was one of having a prototype flight control system that was not designed to be used in that flight environment. It had some sensitivity, some known sensitivity. And unfortunately, it caught that particular pilot on that particular day and caused the resulting accident.
The thrust vectors were integrated into the flight controls, eliminating the need to turn them on and off. Now, they automatically interpret the pilot's movements on the aircraft stick. The harder a pilot pulls on the stick, the more thrust vectoring the flight control system will provide.
All of those commands from the pilot go through a computer, and the computer then manipulates or modulates those control surfaces depending on the flight conditions. I like to think of the vector as simply being like a bigger aerodynamic tail on the airplane. They make the airplane move and pitch, and the pilot has no idea that part of that pitch is from the engines, part of the pitch from the horizontal tail. It's all transparency.
While the crash was a setback for the F-22 program, the Air Force's interest in the fighter never diminished.
My position for about 10 miles.
Impact.
Operation Desert Storm in 1991 proved that a fighter with its capabilities was still needed.
I think we expect what we saw in Desert Storm, that is a clear, decisive, overwhelming show of force that ended the war very quickly with a minimal loss of life of our people. In the future, we should expect that of all of our equipment.
Port 0, you got friendlies in front of you, Will White. Yeah, I see him.
But the Gulf War raised the expectations of the American public for decisive conflicts of short duration. However, Desert Storm also reminded the F-22 designers of the need to be more flexible and ready to react to new problems, such as Iraq's Scud missile, for example.
Many of our requirements were modified as a result of lessons learned in the Gulf War. Hard to find relocatable launch targets, for example, was one of the phenomena that was a fairly significant problem for the U.S. forces. Some of our systems on the airplane are designed to deal with that.
The F-22 design team also had to react to rapid and ongoing changes in computer systems. In fact, one of the aircraft's newer features is flexibility for expansion and swapping out components. Capacity is available within the aircraft to add computer processor power. No hard mock-up of the plane was created. Instead, manufacturing plants in Fort Worth, Seattle, West Palm Beach, Florida, and East Hartford, Connecticut all relied on computer-generated models for such key components. At final assembly in Marietta, these major sections of the aircraft fit remarkably well. In fact, Lockheed Martin claims that some tolerances were accurate to within 1/6000th of an inch. The development that proved most difficult to cope was with the ongoing downsizing of the US military. The shrinking defense dollar at times hurt the fighter's development. The Defense Secretary William Cohen warned Congress that it would have to close more bases to pay for all the weapon systems if desired, but Congress shied away from that painful task. Fearful of the political repercussions that left new weapon systems, such as the F-22, vulnerable to the Pentagon budget acts. Against this backdrop of uncertain federal support, Lockheed Martin unveiled within fanfare its first F-22. On April 9, 1997, the company announced that this aircraft would take its first flight by the end of the following month. But that first F-22 stumbled badly out of the gate. One problem followed after another, and the program quickly fell 3 months behind. Finally, on September 7, 1997, Metz took the first F-22 into the air. That flight tested the aircraft's handling characteristics and engine performance through different power levels. It retracted the gear for a clean configuration to test handling, and it tested the aircraft in formation with an F-16. The roughly 1-hour flight demonstrated the plane could fly. Lockheed Martin and the Air Force called the problems that delayed the first F-22 minor, although the repairs were sometimes complicated. But the delays gave critics ammunition. A military cost review agency twice warned that the F-22 was a risk of billion-dollar cost overruns. Congress complained too many technical problems, and too few test flights. Senators warned that this $187 million plane might be stuck dead if its price per copy kept climbing. The F-22 supporters responded by reminding Congress the fighter was far from a conventional aircraft. Thus, its cost and development were unpredictable.
In my personal opinion, this program has had an unprecedented focus on cost and cost control. We have been what's termed a cost reimbursable contract, principally because we're busting the frontiers of many new technologies on this program, and you can't very accurately predict where that's going to lead you as you bring these technologies online. If you look at this program in terms of its complexity from any historical measure, we believe we're going to deliver the airplane about 25% under what many outside experts think it should cost. So that's rather revolutionary in its own.
Haunted by criticism, this team at Lockheed Martin in Georgia redoubled its efforts. They have succeeded in getting the second F-22 ready for its test flight, a full 9 days ahead of schedule. But being ready is not the full measure of success, and the pressure for a perfect flight only increased. At 9 a.m., everyone who works on the F-22 flight line, from engineers to stockroom clerks, stops what they are doing and heads out to the runway.
We're doing a FOD walk this morning, and FOD is foreign object damage. Any item, a pebble, a rock, any MSP item that might happen to be on the runway could damage the engine. And we are out here this morning to prevent that from happening.
Flight walks are performed once or twice a week at fighter bases. But with this plane, FOD walks are done any time it is scheduled to have its engines running. The workers fan out and scan the pavement for anything that the vacuum truck may have missed.
Something that small can nick an impeller blade and cause it to be off balance. If it's bad enough, it comes apart just like a hand grenade in flight. So we want to be very careful that we get everything off the ramp that we can see.
At the end of the walk, all the workers' bags are carefully collected. There is no prize for the worker who turns into a bag with the most debris.
FOD-free airplane, that's the prize, no busted engines.
With the FOD walk completed, the ground crew begins at its last-minute check. Optimism runs high, but it's short-lived. Suddenly, there is a problem. A small hydraulic leak has been discovered. The pre-flight timetable is halted. For how long? No one knows. 2 hours have gone by. But relief and optimism return. The hydraulic leak has been fixed. Test pilot Paul Metz arrives. He greets Beyer, the crew chief, and the two duo walk around inspection of the fighter. The boom on the F-22's nose reflects the test phase of this aircraft. The antenna sprouting from it will send data streaming back to the small white building. This is the nerve center for the test flight. The building is full of engineers who monitor every system on the F-22 while it's in flight. The ground crew conducts another FOD walk. It's now 11 a.m., and an anxious crowd of Lockheed employees and curious reporters have gathered to watch this F-22 make its first leap skyward. Metz climbs into the cockpit. Byer assists him in buckling up. Starting an F-22 is almost as easy as starting an antique car. Early designs required the pilot to complete 17 steps. But for all its complexity, this F-22 asked him to do just 3 things. Turn the battery on, push the auxiliary power, switch to start, and move both throttles to idle.
The airplane's actually very simple to operate. It only takes a few switches to get it started. And once we get it started, we have to go through a number of checks with the airplane to get it ready for flight.
Byers signals to Metz to bring up the power. Metz talks to both the tower and the control room. Running through more checklists on the ground, Byer, the crew chief, listens in, and paces some more. Now, the plane is ready for its initial move or roll check. Metz eases the jet half-roll forward and taps the brakes. Byer now begins signaling to Metz to head toward the runway. As he rolls out, Metz is engaged in a constant conversation with the control room, running checks for all his systems. He also talks to the pilot of the F-16 chase plane to coordinate takeoff and rendezvous. Metz taxis forward toward the runway, testing his rudder, closing down his engine nozzles. He stops again for what is called the last chance inspection. Byer gives him a thumbs up and hands them over to the tower. The aircraft rolls to the head of the runway and prepares for takeoff. It is now 11:30 a.m. The chase plane heads out. The F-16 will be Metz's eyes outside of the plane, looking for problems, visually verifying all aspects of the test flight. Now, the moment has come. All the months of effort boiled down to a single motion of the left hand. Metz eases the throttle forward and adds power to the engines. A few breathless seconds later, Raptor 2 takes flight. Immediately, the newly born plane physically and visibly gives notice of its sheer power. The nose lifts higher as it surges into a gravity-mocking climb. It's an initial performance that, Metz later will admit, even surprised him. The F-16 must go to afterburner to keep up.
This is a real high point of the airplane. Pratt & Whitney's done a fantastic job with the engines. They operate very, very smoothly with almost no vibration. You can tell no difference between idle and military power.
For all its excitement, the takeoff was not the culmination of today's effort. It was merely a beginning. There is a flight plan to be followed and tests to be done. According to that flight plan, Metz will fly a triangular route over Georgia. He will head north to Jasper, 40 miles away. Then turn west for a 46-mile leg. Then turn south and return to Dobbins and Marietta. After the initial climb, the F-22 slows to 200 knots and levels off. The gear stays down for the first test phase. While he cruises, Metz and the engineers run through checks of the aircraft systems, making sure all are working. Once everyone is convinced the plane is functioning correctly, it is time to check flight control systems. Time to make the Raptor move a little. The ailerons, the rudders, the thrust factors. As something moves, data goes streaming back to the white control building.
Here we're seeing some control motions with the rudder. Again, just relatively gentle maneuvers to see if the airplane responds just as predicted in the simulations. And it did.
Now Metz brings the throttle forward again. The added power pushes the aircraft to 225 knots, and quickly, the two climb to 20,000 feet. Now comes a critical step. The landing gear is tested. It retracts smoothly and is lowered again. Then, raised for good. Putting the gear up represents an act of faith that it'll come back down. The first phase of the test flight is complete. It has not only gone smoothly, it has been perfect.
Bring the gear up and take a look at the characteristics of the airplane and what we call a clean configuration. Landing gear comes up, and once it does, the airplane is very, very smooth. There's absolutely no buffet, and characteristics are excellent.
Everything done with the gear down is now repeated. Checking how the F-22 handles, how the engines respond.
Again, with the gear up, we'll look at some of those relatively mild handling qualities characteristics, such as bank-to-bank rolls, and some of the control inputs. And again, the airplane is very quick, very cat-like and agile in the response.
40 minutes into flight, another milestone test. Metz and the F-16 show the F-22's ability to fly in formation.
And we use the cameraman as a director in this case to help me make relatively rapid and quick changes in position while flying the wing of the F-16 here.
Finally, nearly an hour later, the test flights are over. There's just one thing left to do.
Coming in close to final, the airplane floats very nicely, can be flared, and touches down very softly.
As they land, Metz holds up Raptor's nose to help slow the plane.
Once on the ground, we hold the nose up for aero braking to bleed off some airspeed. I deployed the speed brakes just as the nose came down for touchdown. And that also helps dissipate the airspeed.
With about 5,000 feet of runway remaining, brakes are applied, bringing the F-22 down to a fairly slow speed to finish the rollout.
Handling characteristics in the landing phase are really delight. It'll make any pilot feel proud to bring the airplane back and land it. It's a very easy airplane to land.
As the spectators applaud, Metz brings forward the F-22 over towards them and lets the plane take a bow.
These are the folks that are really responsible for getting me in the air. And there are thousands of people, not only in Marietta, but Seattle, Fort Worth, Pratt & Whitney, and the suppliers around the United States, and in fact around the world, that struggled for a long time to put this airplane together.
Back at the ramp, the ground crew cheers. Metz leaves the cockpit. There are handshakes and photos all around for a successful test flight. It was by the book.
The flight profile was flown exactly as we had planned it out, and absolutely no anomalies on the airplane. It's ready to go again. Don't have a squawk on either the instrumentation or the airframe itself.
Anything unexpected, either good or bad?
Well, you probably saw it on the climb out here. We rotated up to the climb at about 3/4 field and really rocketed on up there. And both myself and the chase pilot both remarked that was a lot spiffier performance than we saw with number one. And I can't explain it because it's a hotter day, but it really went upstairs today.
With the plane safely back on the ramp, Byer can finally stop pacing.
Well, I guess a lot of things go through your mind. I mean, you think about fuel, you think about electrical power, but mainly is great feeling jumping off, and made a few bets with the ground crew how bad the airborne pickup would be. But Colonel Rainey hit it pretty good. He was right with him.
Elation is pervasive among the ground crew.
Fantastic. Got this airplane in the air early, got it back, no squawks on it, perfect.
This successful test flight does much today to chase away the program's demons. The F-22 team has proven it can deliver a test flight early and with flawless results. That should go far in helping others focus on what is really the aircraft's key selling points. Its maneuverability and speed, according to Metz.
The most striking thing that you see when you get in it is the raw power. And that's what's going to be an eye-opener to the operational pilot.
With its flawless test flight behind it, this F-22 will stick to its schedule and fly again in 2 days. After that, it will undergo some minor modifications, then be test flown about a half dozen more times. If those go well, the aircraft will then be ferried to Edwards Air Force Base in California, what will join the first F-22 in future test flights. The naysayers in Congress, meanwhile, will be forced to consider that this plane made its test flight 9 days early without a single hitch, and demonstrated some exciting fighter capabilities.
I think the reliability we're seeing and our ability to hold to schedule with this complex system are both very strong testimony to the fact that the program's coming together.
Beyer agrees.
Well, I think it proves to Congress and the United States Air Force that Lockheed Martin can build a reliable fighter on time and below budget. The crews come together and they know what they're doing, and we worked through some trying times on the first aircraft, but we learned, and that's the biggest thing it showed. We learned from the difficulties we had, and we've overcome them, and now we're a month ahead of schedule.
Now, Beyer is ready to announce the last step. Today for the crew, it's not more testing or more analysis or even reviews, although those will surely go on as well.
Well, I think everybody's going out tonight and unwind a little bit, have a good time. So we'll enjoy ourselves.